Thank you for auditing Professor Sky's Record Review, the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who once again is not sure if I should even be reviewing what I'm reviewing today. I'm going to be reviewing the album by Tobacco, or Tamaxo, as it says on the cover of his album, Effed Up Friends. I'm not going to swear every time there's a swear, but you know what F stands for, and it's actually Effed Up Friends 3. Now, the reasons why I wouldn't review this. The main reason is that I haven't listened to Effed Up Friends 1 or Effed Up Friends 2, although some research tells me that there is no Effed Up Friends 2. The main reason, though, is that I just, instrumental music, it's hard for me because I love talking and I love thinking about words. That's one of my main things. That's more than half of what I do on this channel is talk about lyrics. But still, I want to challenge myself because this isn't always about how much can I say that's interesting, as much as it is, I want to take you on this journey as I discover new music that is good, right? Because that's one of the main ideas behind this channel is as an old man who's in middle age and trying to hold on to what is good about life, I'm trying to realize what is still good about music. And with the passing of Daft Punk, I had a couple requests to do a sort of Daft Punk video. I'm a ridiculously large Daft Punk fan, but I'm not going to do that. At least I'm not going to do that now. And the main reason why is that that's a little bit, necromos, a little bit too focused on death and towards things passing. The reality is that there's so much great electronic music out there that to spend too much time thinking about the best that ever did it is to ignore what's actually happening now. So this is a channel about art, supporting artists, so I don't care. Maybe Tobacco 1, and maybe Effed Up Friends 1 and Effed Up Friends 2 is better than this. I don't know. I'm going to have fun reviewing it because I really enjoyed listening to this album. It's extremely smart, it's extremely well constructed, it's extremely cohesive, it's very, very expressive. There's a lot of things that it's not. It is not an easy listening electronic music album. I don't mean that it's particularly aggressive or hard to listen to, but it doesn't do a lot of the tricks that make electronic music sort of catchy, and there's not a lot of songs that are constructed here to be earworms. There's none of that quarter beat, eighth beat, 16th beat drop thing. There's no sloppy guest appearances. There's no random people singing, oh, I've heard of that person and weren't they with that person? There's no kind of overarching theme or some kind of post-apocalyptic theme album that's just kind of like thrown over the top of a bunch of instrumental music. It is a very odd and very endearing album. So I'm going to talk about it even if there's no words for me to analyze. I think probably the best way to start, and this is like 2 album reviews in a row that I've done this, which is cool. The best way to start is that it's got a very good cover. And the cover, I believe, actually says everything you need to know about the album. So I'm going to show it to you with my amazing, I don't edit these things. If I edited them, I wouldn't put out 3 to 4 a week. So what we have here is a lot of what the album is like. It's some kind of like deep fake AI created image, it appears to be, of faces in probably some kind of potentially sexual ecstasy, but everything is mixed up. The flesh is all mixed together, and you can't tell what's a mustache, and you can't tell what's an eyelash or an eyebrow, like that man's mustache versus that woman's lips and the hands, and they're all mixed together, and everything looks familiar, and it looks very analog, and it looks very 70s, and it looks very kind of like crunchy, almost even like 70s pornish feeling, but at the same time it's very clearly created by a computer. It's still very clearly digital as well as analog. And I think if we put that all together, the kind of bizarre, carnally satisfying, retro, futuristically weird, unsettling cover, that's exactly what the album sounds like. It feels sort of digital and analog at the same time, which is a pretty impressive thing to do, which, by the way, this is not intentional. I wasn't planning on... You'll look at my notes. You can look. I don't have the words Daft Punk anywhere on my notes. But it does actually remind me a little bit of that, how Daft Punk was able to do that, able to make things that sound both digital and analog at the same time. I think maybe he must be using vintage synthesizers, or what I really predict is that he's actually just recording like in an old way. This doesn't feel like it's created on a computer. There's a certain way that songs are layered, a certain way that songs are kind of put together, where you hear just the sort of cut and paste and lining up. And I don't hear that on this. Maybe I'm wrong. Please tell me in the comments if I'm wrong and I'm over romanticizing whoever Tobacco is. Apparently he's from Pittsburgh. which is great. A lot of my family lives in Pittsburgh. I really enjoy Pittsburgh. It's a very underrated city. It's where Warhol's from. But it's got this great feeling of that mixture. It sort of feels like a VHS tape, you know, at times, like the sort of, like, you know, VHS tape, the way that that's distorted is different than, you know, the way a record's distorted or the way a tape is distorted, you know, a cassette tape. It has a sort of like hard to determine distortion, a kind of weird fuzziness to it that isn't quite the same thing as the crackle on a record, right? This whole album kind of has that feel. Mixed in with it are all these very cool and exciting titles that I don't know what they mean. Half Tengu, Rat Bike, Room with HBO, Under the Shit Bridge. I am going to swear sometimes. You can't avoid it. Do you have to use so many curse words, Tobacco? But you know, that's part of what makes this album interesting. As far as the sounds go, the way I felt listening to it, I often find, or in my history of listening to electronic music, and I'm not some expert, I've never even heard of Tobacco before today, so this is my hobby. I'm not a real music critic. You know, like I've always I've always wanted more. Like I remember listening to Mr. Oizo for the first time, the great French electronic musician, who I imagine has some influence here. And I remember just being disappointed because I wanted it to be more like the stuff that I liked. And this album has a little bit more of that. It's just a very consistent feel. It is avant-garde in the way that it's put together, in the way that it sounds, but it never feels like avant-garde in a way that's just kind of annoying you. You know how sometimes people don't know the difference between avant-garde and just pissing off your audience? At no point is this that upsetting, but it's always very hard, and it goes very hard, and you nod your head and you think it's cool, but it never feels cheap. It never feels just like some arpeggiator. It never just feels like someone just pressing a button and letting the computer do what it does. This hissy, fuzzy, awesome sound and feeling that manages to not be affected. And this is a thing that you have to, one of my jobs as a part-time, as a music critic hobbyist, it turns out, is trying to figure out what makes music that sounds like old music good. And it's just not having affect. That's it. Like, not just being like, wouldn't it be cool if this sounded like this was from the 70s or the 80s or the 90s or the whatevers? This at no point feels affected. It just feels like this is this genuine artistic expression. Almost every song has a sort of formula to it, which I'm going to get into. A kind of rumbling sound or a kind of bloopy sound to begin with. And then a very strong lead synthesizer sound. Just very, very strong lead synthesizer. And I'm thinking about, what does the sound make me think of? And I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here, and I apologize. I don't know how young this guy is. This guy is probably younger than me. Everybody's younger than a middle-aged professor. But it really reminded me, like a lot of an old video game from 1984 from Nintendo called Excitebike. So when you think about the way this artist uses these keyboards and these sounds, it really sounds to me like a motorcycle, but a computer motorcycle. I'm going to play you some of the sound effects from Excitebike from 1984. And if you know the music of Tobacco, I think maybe you'll hear what I'm saying. That sort of attack, that kind of crunchy digital sound that still isn't too modern sounding. You hear the sort of attack? It's discordant, but it's also agreeable, and it has that, there's no better word for it than just kind of crunchy feel, like a sort of satisfying, like a taste in your mouth. Too often digital music doesn't leave you with any tannin, you know, like the sides of your tongue, in your brain. Jesus, what the hell am I talking about? Let me get to it. So like often the sounds are too thin with computerized music, and you don't feel like there's something you can really like chew, you know, like really develop the taste and really have anything tactile to it. That's what I'm talking about. I think if you kind of mix together Excitebike along with some of the aesthetics of Kool and the Gang's song Summertime Madness, one of the best songs ever made, which by the way, Kool and the Gang autocorrects in Apple to Kook and the Gang. See? Kook and the Gang. I would say that's kind of how it all works in together. And this is what I eventually realized on my second listen to the album. It's sort of not an instrumental album. There's no words, but I think this lead sound, this lead excite bike attacking keyboard sound is the voice of Tobacco. And if you listen to the songs and you listen to the way he sets them up, where there's this kind of like opening couple bars, and then this lead comes in, you realize that's him singing. He's just singing with the keyboard. He's wailing in this great lead voice. And we don't really know what he's talking about because we don't know, so we can just kind of imagine that the lyrics are the title of the song. So let me go into it kind of track by track. Before I do that, I'm going to give you your homework. If you're interested by what I'm saying, you're like, hey, this sounds like some good music. I like Excite Bike and Kook and the Gang. I wonder what this sounds like. I'm going to put a link up here. I suggest you go find this song, Accuser of the Fucking Brethren. That's my second swear right there. Accuser of the Fucking Brethren. It's a very exemplary song of the album. Most of the album, though, all stays within the same basic range. It's not that easy or hard to find a song that's exemplary on this album. But it has this great kind of like 80s funk synthesizer lead. And then just listen to all these textures. You have this like fuzzy synth line that comes in, and then the lead voice comes in, that kind of sound comes in, and then these drums come in, and they're very interesting and very decidedly sort of 808 drum beats, but a little bit more interesting. Like he does a lot of stuff rhythmically, and I'm going to get to that when I talk about the last song. If you pay attention to what he's doing rhythmically, much like with the rest of the album, he's never just sort of doing the thing that's the first thing you do and it's set and then you have a whole song. He always does something a little extra, and there's a little something extra to this beat. There's also a music video that goes along with this song, which I'm going to be linking to. Content warning for just some weird stuff. It starts off with a woman fighting at Walmart. That's where the title comes from. You're an accuser of the fucking brethren, which is very weird. And then like this woman who looks like a robot, I don't know what, eating a banana in a sexual way with Hieronymus Bosch behind her. It's just a very weird image, and like these sex dolls and like 3D models and like weird fake Sonic the Hedgehog ripoffs. The whole thing feels like a very good example of both that cover and the album, this kind of unsettling feeling that you have with weird sort of analog and digital and all just kind of getting mixed together. A good example of the art of tobacco. You'll see in the back, actually, I have a book called Tobacco. It's about the history of tobacco. It's very interesting. Do you know why tobacco is so deadly? It's because of Duke. The same guy who did, like Duke College is named after him. He was the guy that figured out how to make it mechanical, how to make cigarettes automatically rolled. That's when everyone started dying. Before that, tobacco didn't really kill people. Okay, so let's get back to all the way through the album. It starts off, the first track is called Full of Doom, kind of a jaunty track, bloopy bass, this attacking saw sound, very cool drum machine, like tom fill at times. Next track, Honey of the Trick, my least favorite song on the album, a little bit too much space, a little bit too thin, but it's a very good B section, which makes it more interesting. He always does something to make something more interesting. Even the most interesting songs get more interesting, and the least interesting songs get a little interesting. This Man has this kind of start and stop sound until the Excite Bike lead comes in, and there's an actual human voice in the background. What are they saying? I don't know what they're saying. I don't know what anyone says. And there's a couple words on this album, probably less than 20. I understood about 2. Next song is called For the Queen. The coolest voice sound effect on here with distortion. Very cool sound leading on to Jarasku, which has an actually arpeggiated sound. The only time I believe on the entire album there is automated keyboard sound and arpeggiator. But again, it feels to me like it's arpeggiated in the keyboard, not arpeggiated in the computer. I'm not exactly sure what difference that makes, but that's what I feel. Again, please tell me in the comments if you know about tobacco, because I just don't. I'm just an old fool. I don't really know that much about it. I'm just knowing what I'm listening to here, and that's what I'm hearing. This is cool because that's a very kind of sweet melody on top of it. Every once in a while, he will put in sweet melodies in unexpected places. Like, you sort of want to say, oh, it's a grinding, badass album of a... But then at times, he'll just put in these little sweet notes, and it doesn't feel forced. It's quite nice. Then Accuser of the Brethren. Then the track Everything Around the Knife. It kind of resets at a certain point, and then there's like stuttered sounds. And then these vocals come in, which remind me a lot of the vocals that, once again, Daft Punk used in in Human After All, their sort of least appreciated album. And this is where I think I understand words. Those eyes realize. That's it. That's all I got. These kind of warble sounds like tires screeching and scratching. Leads into the next track, Stridex Dealer. Stridex is the like things that you when you're in high school to get rid of pimples. I think it's just astringent alcohol. Very cool revving sounds bouncing from one ear to another. Really, again, like you're stuck inside of Excitebike. But then some busy sounds fill the center and more layers come in from everywhere. I would suggest this one as a second track to listen to, just to appreciate his ability to layer and create all this texture with all these sounds. Sorority is kind of a downbeat song. I like it more though than the other downbeat song that I liked a little bit less, the Honey of a Trick. It's cool because it has this cool overlaid 80s synths, and there's like a drum break with the 808 drum machine that sounds quite nice. Dianetics Jr. is just, it sounds like those motorcycles revving down, and then the stabby lead. Next track is called Rat Bike. And if you're in the mood for angry, grimy, gritty, dark tobacco, this is the stuff, okay? This is the dark tobacco stuff. Very aggressive, very metal sounding, growling and menacing synthesizers. This is where I came up with the idea of the Excitebike comparison. Probably because he used the word bike in the title. I'm a genius. How did I possibly figure this out? But still, it's nice having these RPM sounds and things kind of fall apart but stay together. And he does this a lot where things kind of fall apart, stay together. This leads directly into my favorite title, Room with HBO. If you've ever driven across the country, you'll see all these hotels that advertise having rooms with HBO. That used to be a big deal. That actually used to be a big enough deal that I would stay in a hotel if I saw that, because I didn't have cable and HBO was like awesome. Like you might see, you know, like a good movie. Like they might be showing like Armageddon or something. You gotta stay in that hotel. And again, more of these bike sounds with a nice melody laid over it, and then a softer sound that softens the edges. Nice mixture of this aggression and calmness, like the aggression from Rat Bike leading into the gentleness here. Under the shit bridge is the next line. Do you have to use so many curse words? It just sounds like a line that Mr. Leahy would say in Trailer Park Boys. Boys, you're under the shit bridge with the shit trolls. But this is my favorite example of this wailing voice over it, this wailing keyboard. Half Tengu might be an attempt to be kind of catchy, these kind of blasting synthesizers that fade out, and these great distorted layers just come in over and over. And I'm going to close the album discussion by talking about the last song on the album, Saturday Coyote, which shows what I'm talking about with his ability to play with rhythm. I don't know if he's done this in the past. Please, if you're a tobacco fan, tell me. He does a lot of really good things with drums on this song that are, I don't think I've heard them done like this before. The thing it reminded me most of is DJ Shadow, not because it even really sounds like DJ Shadow, but because DJ Shadow has an ability to play with drum loops and drum beats in a way that's like a deeper understanding of rhythm and able to mix things together to create something interesting. This is what Tobacco is doing on this song. I actually tried to figure out how many different drum beats he's mixing together in different kinds of sounds. It starts off with like a Casio-style loop, kind of funky and interesting, blown out and distorted. There's a clap added in at some point. And then there's like a similar beat, but a little more hi-hat, and it's like a tighter sounding drum machine. It's a completely different drum machine. And if you aren't paying attention, you won't notice it, except then there's like a stutter step, and the beat basically falls apart. Then the next drum beat is just like, it must be. So again, this I do know about, because I am a drummer. When you make a drum beat in a drum machine, you can create a loop and then just leave it and walk away, right? And that's just a standard thing to do. Or you can like kind of keep building on it, you know, like, and each time it goes around the bars, you can add one more element, and that's how you get a lot of beats that sound like, I don't know, like New Order, you know, like where things just get added, and, you know, you're listening, doomp, 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 right, like that kind of thing. Or, and this is the least used and very hard to do, you actually just play a drum machine with your hands like it's a drum set. It creates a kind of like stuttered rhythm, a kind of weird syncopation where you don't play things at the same time. It sounds sort of like an electronic Charlie Watts from the Rolling Stones. I believe that's what he's doing here. I'm telling you, the rhythm's really deep on this song. So it's like this drum machine that sounds like it's played manually. And then all the way through, this halfway through, like a prefab drum loop comes in that might even be just selected off the computer from one of their automatic drum loops. And he's mixing together these two things at once. And all this is going on with some song mysteriously called Saturday Coyote, with all this weird, cool synthesizer layers going on here. This guy is a very, very good artist, a very good electronic artist. Why am I reviewing this? Because the question that I asked at the beginning of this channel is there any good music out there? And part of that is acknowledging that the answer is yes. And if you think the answer is no, it's because you're dead. This is how you find music and how you stay alive. Daft Punk is no more, but it really doesn't matter. There's no reason to cry. There's going to be great music. There's going to be great electronic dance music, and it's going to keep moving. As a final note, there isn't much written about tobacco. I read one article that talked about how mysterious he was, and then another one that said that he insists that he's not mysterious. I don't know. It's all mysterious to me. I will say I discovered that he wrote the soundtrack to Silicon Valley. And when I discovered that, I was like, oh my God. This all makes sense. Because I've always loved the Silicon Valley soundtrack. It's a very simple song, but it has that same kind of synthesizer sound, the interesting rhythm, the both digital and analog feeling at the same time. It's one of the best soundtracks to any TV show there's ever been, and it turns out it was this guy all along. True story, I went to high school and I'm friends with another guy who works on that, Joe DeVoe. He's a guy who works on that show and contributes music to it. He's an artist as well, very talented guy. Someday, I don't know, I'm going to do a Mike Judge retrospective. I think Mike Judge might secretly be the most important and most influential non-musician in popular music of the past 40 years. Between like Beavis and Butthead and how he used music in Office Space and his TV show that he made about like funk and like Silicon Valley and the way it uses music. I mean, Mike Judge gets a lot of credit, but he doesn't get enough. I think that might be. Okay, maybe that'll be something I'll do on my Patreon. I did start a Patreon, everybody. If you're here this late, you might be the kind of person who'd sign up for it. The idea behind the Patreon is I don't keep any of the money. All the money you give me, I use to buy albums. That's it. I use it to give money to artists. And this tobacco album is a good example of something I would buy with that money. So you could do that or not, or give money to people who need it more. Because I have a job. I'm doing well. But if you'd like to support me, that's great too. All right, well, until next time, for Duke and all of North Carolina, there's the camera.